All righty, guys. We are on a hot streak here with some great guests. I have been looking forward to this guest for God since we started doing this. He was one of the original people I reached out with, and of course, the computer just steadily fell apart on us. So, um, we are in a treat. We have finally gotten a Covey FAC. We have then Captain Don Fulton, who flew with the 20th TASS out of Pleiku. The squadron was based at Da Nang. He was Covey 538, and he worked exclusively in the Central Highlands, pretty much with CCC. And we're going to get a lot of big stories out of him. Many of you have heard Ed Walkoff speak very highly of Captain Fulton. And for those of you that are looking for reading material on Captain Fulton, Captain Fulton, Captain Fulton is featured a lot in this book. A great book. It's Placer's personal tour, but he's mentioned a lot in this. So I recommend, if you don't have that, please get out and get it. But without any more jibber jabber on my part, sir, I'd like to pass it on to you, and thank you in advance for joining us today.
Well, my pleasure. It's a surprise to me. This is my first time doing a podcast. I don't even know how to find it on the computer. I run across them and listen to them, and I see so many friends doing these, and it's an honor to do it. And I'm open to whatever you'd like me to discuss. I flew as a Air Force pilot for 25 years. I started out in tankers, the KC-135. Matter of fact, my first time in Southeast Asia was 4 months flying out of Utapao, Thailand, refueling fighter bombers going in and out of North Vietnam, which was a real adventure. That was the first time I really enjoyed flying the tanker because you felt like you were doing something. I'd been assigned to SAC, the Strategic Air Command, out of pilot training, and I kind of thought it was dull but boring. You'd fly 2, maybe 3 times a month, and you'd sit in the alert facility for 1 or 2 weeks a month. And I hated the job, but when we went to Southeast Asia, you felt like you were doing something, and it was a great tour. I used to use my spare radio after we refueled a flight of fighters. When the lead gave the rest of the flight a frequency, I would switch over on my radio and listen up, and they would connect with what we called ABCCC, or the Airborne Command and Control Center, which was a 130. I don't know how I got the picture that big. There we go. And they would give them instructions to connect with a forward air controller, and they would. And my experience was listening in on the airstrike. I came away from all those airstrikes that they did knowing that I did not want to be a forward air controller, because these poor guys were getting shot up, shot down, parachuting out, and none of them got killed that I listened to, but they were, the situation was sporty, you might say. And when I came back from that tour, I let my family know, God, if there's one job I would not want to have in the Air Force, would be a forward air controller. I thought being in SAC was like a life sentence, and I'd be in there till I either left the Air Force or retired. I took a few days leave with my family, my little 3-year-old daughter, and we went camping, came back, and everything I didn't want was there waiting for me. I had an assignment to be a forward air controller. And I did everything I could do to try to get that changed. We had managed to get an assignment to Sacramento, our hometown, well, my wife's hometown and my adopted hometown since I was 18, and bought our first house, and everything was nice. Went to our own church and friends and all that. It was perfect. But that didn't last long. Only about 1.5 years. Went off to training to be a forward air controller, and continued in my own devotions that God would change this assignment because I didn't want to get killed at an early age and miss my wife and daughter, because I thought this was an assignment that would be easily to get killed in. And I was reluctant to get killed, as most people are. And I actually signed on as an advisor to God, telling him what I wanted and what he should do. And he was probably laughing. And anyway, that went on through the different training and the survival schools and all that BS. And it wasn't until I got to Da Nang, and it was just, I got to Da Nang and somebody told me, you want to be an in-country FAC, you don't want to go out-country. In-country, you could fly ahead, you could fly above the heaviest ground fire that you'll receive. In Laos and in Cambodia, you can't because they use AAA and the O2 doesn't go that high. So my devotions again turned to let's stay in Da Nang, and it'll be a better protected base and a smaller threat, and more helicopters around to pick you up if you go down. And they also said you don't want to go to Pleiku because they get rocketed and mortared all the time. It's not a good place to go. So my assignment came down. I was going to be an out-country FAC and be stationed at Pleiku. So it seemed like everything I wanted, I got the opposite. And it wasn't until one evening, and I was doing my devotions, I didn't have a specific plan for my reading of the scripture, and I just opened it up, and it fell open at Psalms 91, and it seemed to stand out on the page. I read that, and a great calm came over me, and I knew I would be okay, even though during the tour there were moments of doubt on several missions, but we came through it fine. And so I felt better about the assignment, got checked out, had some, for the most part, wonderful people checking me out in the assignment at Pleiku. These guys had been there a long time. They were a lot more aggressive than I thought I wanted to be, but later I turned into the same animal. And I survived. They taught me how to survive, and I'm eternally grateful and still keep in contact with some of those folks. After a few months, I was recruited into the SOG mission, and they ushered me into an office at Pleiku, and a couple of the senior officers asked me to volunteer for they referred to it as the Prairie Fire Mission, which was also the emergency code name to getting a team out. And I said, fine, tell me about it. They said, we will, but first you have to sign these papers. Even if you don't volunteer, you can't talk about what we tell you for 25 years. So I wasn't able to talk about this until 1994. And for whatever reason, I signed and volunteered for the program. It turned out to be the best job I've ever had. It was the most rewarding job, not financially, but in later years, after 2000, when I joined the Special Ops Association, I got to meet many of these people that I had helped and still do occasionally. It's kind of weird when Rambo wants to hug you when he finds out you were the FAC that helped him out many years ago. And well, that's how I got into it. And Bud, where would you like to start on anything about SOG?
Let me get you to where we can see each other. You did a good job kind of describing kind of before we get into SOG, did you always know that you were wanting to fly fixed wing no matter what? You grew
Well, that's
up,
what I went in for. You know, I've been rescued by helicopter a few times, but I like riding in helicopters. They're cool, but I preferred fixed wing. I was one of those people like to go fast. And except for my FAC tour, that sounds funny, a FAC tour, a FAC tour, I've flown jets. And I went from the O2, which I flew mainly out of Pleiku. I did fly for a while in the OV-10. I got a local checkout, a couple of rides to see if I could. I was a combat tactics instructor prior to getting into the SOG business, and they in all their wisdom, the Air Force sent brand new pilots in the OV-10, which was new, came to us in early '69, and they didn't have any combat tactics instructors, so I'd have to ride in the OV-10. So a Lieutenant Colonel Blanton gave me a couple of rides and let me land it a few times so I get a feel for the airplane in case if I was out training somebody and they got wounded or incapacitated in some way that I could possibly land the airplane or make a good go at it. I wouldn't say I was fully qualified in the OV-10. And but then I no longer did that once I got into SOG because I was too busy. So that mostly in the O2, the old push me, pull you, the civilian version is the 337. And a great airplane. It brought me home from 195 combat missions, even though it was shot up on occasion. But it was a good airplane.
Absolutely. And did you I've got our notes around here somewhere. Your basic when did you I get this all the time because I've gotten to where I've stopped asking. When did you initially get into the military?
Well, I first got in when I was 17.
Wow.
November 15th of 1957, I enlisted and went to Lackland and then to Shepherd to become an aircraft mechanic, and did that. Got an early out. My first assignment, operational assignment, was at Mather in California. And I got there about the 19th of May of 1958. And I was invited on a youth retreat by the master sergeant was in charge of OJT program, the on-the-job training. He was also the Sunday school superintendent at my future wife's church. So I met her the day after she graduated from college, not college, but high school. And we went to college together. Anyway, so we've been together since I think the 5th or 6th of June, whenever the day after she graduated from high school. And matter of fact, next month on the 10th of October, we're going to celebrate our 64th anniversary.
Wow.
So you need some kind of a medal for putting up with me all these years.
Hey, she sounds like she's one heck of a lady.
She is, and if they could turn back the clock, I'd marry the same girl all over again.
I love hearing that.
She's not only a good wife, but she's been a great mother.
64 years. I mean, that's an amazing accomplishment.
Keep in mind, I was a child bride.
Well, I mean, still 60. You don't hear about stuff like that. I mean, that's it's amazing, and we all wish you an early anniversary, happy anniversary. That's absolutely amazing, sir. I'm so glad to. I love hearing stories about that with especially how much you were doing, and I know she was busy, and y'all still sticking together and going together like peas and carrots as Forrest Gump.
Well, I've had so many TDYs. Maybe we can't count it as 64 years.
I hear that. All right. So you've kind of shown us a little bit about, I mean, you joined very early. You're getting a lot of training.
I was the last guy discharged, and there's a whole story there. But anyway, I got discharged on the 1st of September of 61. I was getting an early out so I could go to college. College started on the 11th of September. And we had already moved, paid our tuition, and we were staying with my in-laws in Sacramento, and then went off to college. And I just happened to be driving by the recruiting officer in January of '65, and I was going to be graduating in May from college. And I decided to drop in and see about becoming an officer. When I left the service, you had to go to what they call it, cadets, and I don't think you could be married, but I wanted to see what they had to offer, and I found out that I could actually go to pilot training if I qualified. So we took the test and qualified, and the physical and qualified, and went off to officer training school at Lackland, and then pilot training at Webb Air Force Base in Big Spring, Texas, and graduated from there. I think it was the 4th or the 7th of February of 67. And my first operational assignment was 135s at Mather again, which certainly surprised some of the old sergeants that were still there that I came back as an officer, which probably ruined their trust in the Air Force, but whatever. We enjoyed it.
I mean, there you are. While you're working with the 135s, I mean, you already kind of get a taste of Thailand and a little bit of, isn't that correct? Don't you?
Well, I didn't go to Thailand until I was in the tankers.
Okay, wow. Well, I mean, that's pretty wild. There you are, not even getting to see Thailand, and I think Taiwan also. I think you.
Well,
we
lived in Taiwan for 2 years. Yeah.
Wow.
A great assignment. I worry about Thailand with the Chinese threat.
I do
wonderful
too.
people. My daughter was about 6 when we went, 6.5, and
wow,
about 8.5 when we left. And it was a wonderful tour. And we thoroughly enjoyed it. Wonderful people. Mm-hmm. Your children were safe on the street. You didn't have to worry about anybody doing anything. The police.
No crime whatsoever.
Well, they had crime, but not on us. You know, somebody might steal something, but they didn't steal anything from us. Our houses, we had an ama or a maid, and they took care of everything.
Wow,
it was a wonderful experience. The bad part was that you know, we spent most of our time in Vietnam flying, and during the big push in 72 when we lost our first guy, 130, the engineer got killed, and I think it was the nav and the co-pilot were injured, and they knocked out 2 engines on the airplane, and the guy was able to make the landing and that's when the spring offensive started on Easter Sunday of 72. We ended up being augmented with 2 rotation squadrons from the CONUS, and so we had 6 130 squadrons. We had 110 operational 130s, and during that month, as I recall, we had 59 130s battle damage from minor to major, and I think we lost 8 or 9. So trash hauling was a sporty event at the time.
Good Lord. I mean, that's a hell of a bump to take right there for the initial offensive.
They were using the Strela missile, which was a shoulder-launched missile, and we didn't have the fancy flare system that they have now. They had locally manufactured a bar that fit across the troop doors on the 130, and they had 2 40-millimeter flare launchers, you know, like a big shotgun shell on each. And then the navigator had one over his, right by his desk, up in the ceiling, that would shoot out over the right wing, high above the right wing. But the guns on either side, the flare guns on either side, would shoot through the exhaust of the engines. And the loadmasters would be tethered with their parachute on, of course, looking out the door. The Strela, when they launched it, gave a kind of a corkscrew smoke trail at first and come up at you. So these guys would start firing these. And that was kind of interesting. I landed one time in Phnom Penh when I was flying the 130 with a load of 40,000 pounds of Class A explosives. And we spiraled down from 15,000 feet. And just before touchdown, well, I had to turn off the 5,000 foot mark And the airplane that was about 7,500 feet down the runway was I think it was a C-47, might have been a 46, got hit with a mortar. So
Almighty.
we went around and came back, landed, did an engine running offload. They were closing the ramp and the door when I took the runway to climb back up and spiral back up. I wasn't on the ground 5 minutes, I don't think. But you
My
earn your money
God.
some of those days, even trash hauling.
I wanted to, and as you'll have to correct me now. I want to show this video or picture here. Is this the aircraft you were the KC?
Yeah, that looks like a new one. The engines look bigger.
Okay, okay, but that's
Yeah,
that's the you were the
KC
predecessor
135.
to this.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, this is December 11th, Kadena Air Base in Japan with the 909th Squadron for refuel. But
Yeah,
man, I
those
can't
look like the big engines. Those we had the smaller engines. I think they were about 13,500 pounds of thrust each, and the airplane grossed out about 300,000. I later flew the C5, and a full load of fuel on the C5 was 332,500 pounds, which
God,
weighed more than a fully loaded tanker. I think you have
see,
a picture of the two of them, the C5 being refueled.
I do, and I need to bring that up, but I've got this one handy right here.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, that's fine. We can go
it is
back to FAC missions if you want.
can let's see. I just messed that up. Sorry, guys. You got to bear with me. I'm not used to this yet. Is that the
That's the
C5?
C5.
Good God Almighty! Look at the size of that thing.
Well, they gross out about 840,000 pounds, a little more than the O2, which when his max gross was around 5,000 pounds.
Boy, I mean,
This
so
thing's almost 250 feet long and almost it just lacks a few inches to being 223 feet wide. When you're sitting in the cockpit, you're 4 stories off the ground. You're 40 feet high. The cockpit floor is about 36 feet.
I mean, the cockpit windows right here, which are huge, I'm sure, in normal parlance, but I mean, it looks like it's a. I mean, y'all are babies flying a monster. I mean,
Well, we had an airline once to take note to the air traffic control. He says, "I think we have an aluminum overcast flying over."
mm, I. And what was so was the C5 strictly was it a an all encompassing hauler, was it a troop hauler, was it a gear
Well,
hauler?
they could put troops downstairs, but that was usually cargo, and like people always say, it could haul 6 Greyhound buses
Dang, 6.
and 73 passengers upstairs in the back.
Wow. What was y'all's, I mean, when you're using the C5, considering it's so big, before we get into SOG, which we're about to do, how far, what's your flight time? I mean, is it,
Well,
you
you
got to
could go
constantly
any place
refuel?
because you could be refueled in the air.
Okay. Did y'all have any, we were speaking to a man that, William Walter, who was a AC-130 gunship crew member, and he was talking about the aerial refuels. Did y'all have any issues? How was that like filling up those big beasts up there in midair?
Well, the boom operator was in the back doing all that. When I was first in it, I was a co-pilot and I managed the refueling. A B-52, you turn on all 4 pumps. Fighters usually did 1 pump. I don't think we ever did 2 because if you put them all on, you could blow the guy off the boom. So it was interesting.
That is, and I mean, to do
It's
all
it's
that,
it's it's a little harder when you're the guy being refueled.
no.
Underneath the tanker, there's lights to tell you how high you are or how far forward or back you are. And there's lights in the middle that tell you you're just right, you know. And the boom operator gives you instructions too. Move it up a little bit, back, whatever.
Yeah, I thought I saw some. They couldn't show some of it because I think this may have been the F-35 or one of the high fancy new ones they've got that was being aerial refueled, but they gave enough of a way of the heads up display to where it's like a game, to where it, move left, move
Right.
right,
Well,
up.
I can't tell you what it looks like from the fighters. Well, I have been refueled in the F4,
Oh,
but so
wow, that's heavy duty. Well, to get into SOG, I thought an interesting thing to even get into that. You had actually, if I am not messing up your history here, did you had actually come across hearing about the Ravens, didn't you? And thought about
well, I
maybe.
actually volunteered for the Ravens, and when I first volunteered, they weren't taking anybody that didn't have any tail dragger time.
Oh,
Where the wheels at the back of the airplane. And I've never flown that type. I've flown in them, but I've never flown that type of airplane. And matter of fact, my first ride when I was 14 was in a Piper Cub. The guy came and landed in a pasture that was covered with snow, had enough speed to hop over the fence and roll out the next one. And I was at this dairy farm up just outside of Rome, New York. And he gave me a ride back to his place, and we went tearing down the pasture in this snow, hopped over the fence, had enough airspeed for that, and continued accelerating till we got to his place. And then I don't know what he did, some kind of whifferdale, and twisted and did whatever kind of acrobatics. I have no clue. But when we landed, I thought, man, this flying stuff is really great. I like this. So later that day, I had a ride in a tri-pacer out of the airport in Rome, New York, with the same guy, and terrific. And those are my first introductions to flying.
wow. I mean, what would you have? I mean, looking back, I mean, I guess it was meant to be you getting into SOG and everything. But would you have? Do you think had you had the experience they needed, you think you could have seen yourself adapting and doing as well as you did in SOG and enjoying it like you did with SOG?
Oh yeah, but that was all part of my
Plan.
initial FAC. Putting in airstrikes along the Ho Chi Minh Trail against trucks and also AAA. That was kind of one of the things. My dear friend, he passed away, I think about 95. A guy named Bob Grable, a great guy, and we were flying together. And you flew for 5 missions if you were flying nights, and so we would swap off who manned the starlight scope. And you'd hang out the window with the starlight scope as you run up and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And we were bored to death one night, but it was a dark night. You couldn't do this if you had moonlight or high thin clouds with moonlight behind them, because then you'd be like a moth on the movie screen. But when it was dark, we could go over these choke points where they had lots of AAA, and we'd call the fighters in. We used to tell AB triples, we have active guns. They weren't doing anything. But we knew that if we turned our lights on, they would. So when the fighters were up above circling overhead, we would brief them our altitude that we were going to be at. There was a code. The code for the day was angels, and that would be an altitude. Angels might be 4,000 feet, and then whatever your altitude, you'd be add or subtract to what angels was for the day. And so you didn't give the enemy how high you were, but they probably knew anyway. But anyway, and then we would tell them we're going to fly across the AAA cluster and turn our lights on. And then when the gunfire started, we would start our brake, say to the right, turn all the lights off, and then quickly turn to the left, and they would start firing in the direction that you started. And we would tell them we're going to be in this quadrant, and you're cleared hot on at such and such altitude. And you're cleared hot on the guns, and the guns are shooting away, and the fighters are just come down out of the sky and bomb the hell out of them. And we thought this was, we were so clever. It's just the greatest invention since sliced bread. And Bob and I were in the officers club having lunch one day at Travis. We were both flying the C5, and we were in the same squadron. And we got to talking about it. I said, you couldn't be much dumber than to do that. But we thought it was really fun at the time. that's how stupid you get sometimes, or crazy, and flying these missions just to get some action. It was one of those dull nights, and we needed a little something to do.
Yeah, I mean, as we're about to find out, you definitely had some hairy missions and were busy for quite a while. We've got a few comments that I thought were interesting. Squid says, friendly fact, this is Green Beret."
I've heard that. But usually didn't use friendly fact. It was just our call sign.
Jake B, my grandfather was Covey 87 out of Da Nang in 1972.
Huh. Well, I don't know when they went to the 2-digit. I know they did some 2-digit early on, and then it became the 3-digit number. The 200 series, like 200 and 250 would have been out of Da Nang. If it was 350, it'd be out of Pleiku. I never knew anybody with a 2-digit while I was over there. That doesn't mean a thing. Things change.
Can you, before we start getting into the nitty gritty, can you especially clarify for me exactly where? So you were there working with CCC 69 to 70, or was it 69 71?
Well, I got there in 68 in December, and I was there through 68 or 69. I was not there in 70. In 71, in July of 71, I went back as a 130 pilot on my third of 3 tours.
Wow, that's what I thought. Heavy duty. And man, that's a lot of work then in a year. I thought you had a little more than a year doing FAC work with SOG, but whoo, you get it done. What we've got, let me see if any questions have come up. He's not only a hero, but also a great grandpa. I'm not sure who Steven Gonzalez is, but maybe speaking to his relative. I'm not sure. Very interesting.
Well, who was that? Steven
Gonzalez.
That's my grandson.
Oh, good Lord. Hey, Steven. Yes, your grandpa is an absolute hero, and I can only imagine he is one awesome grandpa. He is he's done a lot for me, and I cherish our friendship and getting to speak to him. I'm glad you're able to watch. He is one hell of a man. Enough. I'm sorry to embarrass you like that, but would you care to speak a little bit before we get into some of your amazing air combat? Could you describe what it was like, maybe getting there first? Did you get a briefing explaining what was going on, and then did you get to
you mean when we got to the
compound,
the insertion?
For when you first got to meeting with the SOG men and all that and explaining
well,
what was
a lot of times I never met the guys that I helped.
Okay.
I've met more of them since.
Mm.
Usually in Las Vegas at the Special Ops Reunion, which is an eclectic group of folks.
To say the least.
We're some, like one fellow told me as we sat down in the hospitality room, I have these big tables, you could probably sit 10 people around it. And he said, well, there's a couple of people.
Jimmy Short,
great guy, the guy on Ed Wolkoff's left, he lives up in Sitka. I can't think his name is escaping me, as
Dale
well as
Hansen,
the guy on the right.
Dale Hansen and Jimmy Shorten, the wild
Yeah,
carrot.
okay, yep, okay. And of course, Ed Wolkoff in the middle. The funny story about Ed lost his eye while he was going to one of the senior schools, and I think it was in Kansas City, and got a head-on with some drug dealers that the police were chasing, and Ed was seriously injured. But when I re-met Ed in 2000, he had his eye patch. And I don't know if it was 5 or 6 years ago or less. He finally got a prosthesis that he'd been asking for. And he came to the Special Ops Reunion not wearing his patch. And nobody knew him. He might as well have been wearing a mask. Nobody recognized Ed without his patch. He had to keep introducing himself, and he was trying to meet somebody. So we finally put the patch back on so people would know who he was. And Ed is one of the brightest people I know, and an absolute brother. And I have nothing but the greatest respect for him. He's just a fantastic individual, and I am fortunate to have him as my dear friend.
And
He was the
he's gonna.
number 2 guy on the Sad Sam operation where John St. Martin was so gravely wounded.
And we will be going into that exclusively here pretty soon. Can you kind of describe what the well, first off, since you mentioned you're not meeting the guys really so much, although I'm sure you cross paths with them. Where exactly is you guys weren't like the 219th? Y'all weren't staying at
No, I was
Pontoon
at
with the
Pleiku.
guys.
These guys are at Pontoon, about 14 miles up the road. And then they would stage out of Docto 2, further up the road, and come across in the border, in the tri-border area. That was called the Pepper Basket, which was a hot area. And Ben Het was just a little bit east of the tri-border area, which is another sporty spot. And we would usually meet up at the approximate area they were going to insert. And my job was to, they would come or meet up, A1s would meet up with us, and they would be there to cover the insertion, which sometimes didn't last long because I don't know how they knew where they were going, but the A1s were there to suppress any ground fire that they got. And usually there were times you had to take the team out immediately and look for someplace else. And sometimes they got in fine. And, there'd be a day or so in before there was any action. Usually within 3 days, there were people following them. And Ed Wolkoff can tell you some interesting stories about those. They had trackers and dogs. And I remember one guy said to put CS powder underneath some leaves. And then they wouldn't go very far and watch the dogs just go bananas when they took a whiff of that, and the dogs were done for the day. But anyway, my job was there to just help them get in, and usually getting out, it was not uncommon to be like supporting Custer at the Little Bighorn. Not that I was there, not that old, but they used to have more Indians after them and better armed than Custer had. And the SOG mission was a sporty mission. Those guys, I take my hat off to those guys. Anybody who goes out into, as we used to call it, Indian territory, not to make it derogatory, but everybody knew what they meant,
Mm-hmm.
It was out where the bad guys were. And they were always outnumbered. And
yeah, your daughter-in-law.
That's my son-in-law up in
Son-in-law.
Washington.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm glad they're on here getting to see it. Could you describe then what your first since you're in the circle, so to speak, can you describe what your first operation, mission, or tasking to help a SOG team or hatchet force team?
Well, I really don't remember the first one. There was just a lot of them. And like I say, I always jokingly refer to as supporting Custer. And but the great guys, there were funny times. I mean, Ed's mission, Ed and John St. Martin.
If you'd like to go ahead and cover either Ralph's or Ed's mission, by
Well,
all means.
Ed's mission, we inserted them, or I inserted them, and then when they were safely on the ground, if you can call it safely, I went off and helped another team a few miles north that had been under siege, and they'd been trying to get them out for a couple of days or so. And I relieved a FAC that was running out of gas, and then somebody came and relieved me because I was running out of gas. And I honestly don't remember how many airstrikes we put in, but I went across the border to some strip that I could land at, and got gas from the Army. And I didn't borrow. They gave me rockets. I reloaded my own rockets and jumped back into the fray. And we did end up getting that team out. But I ended up flying that day almost 8 hours. I think I was about a tenth of an hour shy. So you consider the time before you take off the first time, the time on the ground, refueling your own airplane and loading rockets and flying back out and doing another mission and flying back. And it was a long damn day. And then I went out the next morning, or the next midday, I guess it was, or late afternoon, I think was when I got to Ed. And they had found what at first they thought was, I think, a company or something. And they found these long buildings. I think they were half sunk in the ground, as I recall, with really heavy logs. And you couldn't see this from the air. That triple canopy, they had woven it together or tied it together. And the area below was completely denuded of vegetation. It was obviously a place where they briefed people or held classes or whatever they did. And apparently there were 3 battalions bivouacked around this. It turned out, we later learned, it was like a month after the Silver Star was approved for me, that it was a regimental headquarters. And as I recall, Ed telling me it was Ho Chi Minh's elite regiment. So I readily tell people I don't understand Army thinking, but they found this place, they backed off from it, and it was very hard to get air that day, TAC air, because there was a SAR, a search and rescue mission for a downed pilot several miles north of us, and they kept trying to get air, and they finally got, that's John St. Martin, and that a rectangle thing above his chest, in the middle of his chest, is a Claymore mine. Interesting. And anyway, we finally got some A1s on the way back, and they could usually stay there longer than me, but they were out of gas. So they John gave me an azimuth and a guesstimation for a distance on where I could see him down in the bamboo. From where he thought the target was. So they bombed, they did very little damage to the target. And then they had some heavy machine guns open up on us, and the fighters strafed and bombed them. And then they had to leave. And Ed or John broke his team into 2 4-man teams and advanced forward. And it was when John was straddling a log that an NVA soldier popped up and fired at him. And he had his weapon at the ready and a grenade with the pin already pulled. And it struck him in the ankle with an AK round, in the right thigh, broke that bone. And another one went across his abdomen, didn't pierce his intestines, but it did allow him to spill out. Now, if they were just there on the floor, right where you are, waiting for the paramedics, that would be serious wound. But he was in Laos in the jungle. John had sense enough to throw the grenade and then fall off the back of the log. Now their guys were in a gunfight, and Ed was doing the first aid, wrapping up his ankle, wrapping up his thigh, piling his intestines on his stomach, pulling a shirt over it and putting a belt to hold it, and carrying John. And as Ed told me not too long ago, he said he was so tired he couldn't have moved him another inch. And with the attack, he thought that he might get off 2 magazines before he was killed. And that's when I started strafing. There were breaks in the jungle where I could see people running towards their location. And at the time, from what I could see, I estimated to be about 500 to 600 people. So I would, with the rockets I had, the white phosphorus rockets, which you don't ever want to get white phosphorus on it. It keeps burning till it burns out. You can put water on it, mud, whatever you want, and it keeps burning. I would fire into whatever little herd I could see. fire one rocket. Sometimes I wouldn't fire any, but I'd bore down on them and they would take cover, slow down. And I kept asking ABCCC, the Airborne Command and Control Center, to send me fighters. And I don't know why I had to keep telling them where to look, because they have all this info up there. I've flown with them as an orientation ride for me. There was actually a boondoggle to Thailand for a couple of days, but I flew with them for 13 hours, which sucked. Anyway, well, we can't get any there. And I'd go roll in and I'd tell them where to look next and roll in and fire a rocket or not fire a rocket, climb back out. No, we can't get those. And then give them something else. And they kept doing this. And I was, when you're in the deep end of the swamp and you're standing on your tiptoes, it was not a pleasant feeling. And so anyway, we, on one of my, as I climbed out and got ready to roll in again, the guy says, well, we can get the gunfighters out of Da Nang. I think it was this 366 F4s. I said, great. What kind of ordnance do you want? And being your proverbial smartass, plus I was frustrated at the time with their delay, I said tactical nukes. And I rolled in on my next strafing pass, and all the radios went silent. And because the enemy but everybody's probably saying he wants what? But nobody said anything. And I pulled off. And I often thought if that was my last word, got shot down and killed, that they would have thought maybe the situation was serious. But since nobody talked, I said, if you can't get that, I'll take wall-to-wall napalm and CBU or cluster bomb units. So then the radio started again. Okay, Roger. And so they got the Da Nang F4s to come. And so when we just about ran out of rockets, we got down close to the trees. I had a theory: the closer you were to the bottom of the cone, if you think of a cone, the further up you are, the more you're in the target range. And I thought maybe you could skim across the top of the trees and have less exposure, but there must have been a lot of good skeet shooters because they really did a number on the airplane. And then Howard, I kept a lot of magazines with me, and Howard he had to turn my Car 15 90 degrees so the expended shells would fall between the door and his seat, because I didn't want them going out the window and going through the prop and through the horizontal stabilizer and maybe shooting ourselves down. So Howard was shooting sideways with the weapon. And so we did that. And about the time we ran out of ammunition, the help were starting to arrive. But Howard put the weapon down, and 2 RPGs went off well above us, but on either side. And I remember thinking to myself, who the hell do you think you are, John Wayne? You better get out of here. So we started climbing, and as we were climbing out, they had 2 more RPGs, and that's an impressive airburst. Go off at our altitude and off to either side. And then 2 more went off below us as we gained altitude. And as I looked down on one of the choppers that came in, and it's now dusk and raining, one of those RPGs went off to the right of the chopper, and the fireball was as big as the rotor, distance of the rotors. And I was really impressed. And boy, had it gone on, hit our airplane, it certainly would have toasted our chestnuts. And anyway, it got dark. The helicopters came in. The Cobras were zipping around and TAC air. And the slicks came in and dropped 4 100-foot ropes from each chopper, and they hovered with their lights on. I mean, these guys had big brass balls. And Ed had to help John, and John weighed about 10 pounds more than Ed at the time, lift him up and hook him up. I think it was a stable rig. And they pulled those guys out, and they flew in the rain, in the dark, for 60 miles to get John out, and with 3 other team members. And then Ed and 3 other team members got out on a different chopper. And we fired our last two rockets at the AAA that was firing and got out of there ourselves. Ed had an interesting experience. They took him to Docto too. And I don't know, well, that's the shortest way to get him back in the helicopter. But they were dragging Ed and the team on the tarmac. And there were sparks coming up from Ed's backpack. And he was signaling, he's laying on his back and signaling to the door gunner to, bring the chopper up, get him off the ground. They did for a little while, then put him back down, drug him some more, and they finally stopped, and they were able to get in the chopper and take him back to Khartoum. And Ed dumped his gear in his room and went out and got debriefed and got something good to eat. And John was taken to the hospital at Pleiku. He took 7 pints of blood that night. If he wasn't in tip-top condition, John would have died. He spent 11 months in the hospital, and I'm glad he survived. He's a terrific individual and a dear friend. And next day when Ed was checking his gear, all those sparks were coming from a claymore and had almost ground down to the detonator. And if that had gone off, they would have lost a chopper along with the team. So everybody was lucky that night. We flew home, and Howard and I flew home in a driving rainstorm, landed at Pleiku in a very heavy rainstorm, taxied in. Crew chief came up, and they usually open the door. And I said, please don't. He opened it a little bit, and the shells, the casing started falling out. So we got a bucket, a 5-gallon bucket, and got most of them. And Howard had suffered some type of a slight wound in his right neck, not much. I just forget what caused it, but I don't know if it was a round or a hot casing or something. And we begged off on the debrief, took Howard to the dispensary, got him wrapped up. He looked like a Catholic priest with the white bandage around his neck. Took him up to the club, bought him a couple of stiff drinks. I don't drink. Didn't drink then, don't drink now. And then bought him a steak dinner, and we went into the lounge. They had a USO show going. I should have gone to bed because my butt was dragging. Sat down, and my boss, Lieutenant Colonel Lou Hill, came in and sat down about 3 seats to my left and leaned forward and said, Fulton, 2 gallons. My mind had already turned to oatmeal. I had no idea what he was talking about. I wasn't even thinking about the mission. I was too tired to think about the mission. And I said, 2 gallons of what? He said, 2 gallons. I said, sir, you want 2 gallons of what? He said, I don't want 2 gallons. That's all you had in that blankety blank airplane. It only holds 122 gallons. And we put 120 gallons in the airplane. Well, the airplane burned about 8 gallons an hour per engine, being the twin engine. So we didn't have a lot of gas. And I said, so, sir, I didn't leave it out there. I brought it back. He said, well, that's another thing. Your airplane is all shot to shit. I said, maintenance can fix it. He threw his arms up and sat back and never mentioned it again. I visited him in 2004 in a hospital in Spokane, Washington. We were having a little reunion, and we laughed about it. About that, in 2000, I met with Howard. I was on the East Coast driving down to Savannah to pick up my wife. Stopped. I now had discovered these guys were alive. Stopped in Fayetteville and met Howard at a coffee shop. We had a cup of coffee and reminisced a little bit. And we were laughing about Colonel Hill and his 2 gallons. And Howard said, well, I'd flown in that airplane enough times. I kept looking at those fuel gauges, and they all said empty. And I looked over at you, and you didn't seem to be too concerned. So I said, screw it. I'm not going to worry about it. So I said, Howard, that's why we followed the road. Had they quit, we would have landed on the road. And Howard said, oh. So we laughed about it there. So anyway, that was the John's St. Martin Ed Wolkoff meeting. I did see, I think it was Ed took me over to see John the next day or so. And he was so drugged up, he has no memory of that, but he held onto my hand and kept saying, thanks for saving me. And it choked me up. I had to leave. I'm glad he survived. I didn't know he survived the war until 2000. So that's their story.
Did
And
you
that's in John Plaster's book.
it is. I'm about to show that as a matter of fact. But could you since Mr. John Blob was there and he's
Well, he was part of it, but I have never met John, and I think I've only talked to him once or twice.
he was on about 2 months ago, and we're in close contact. And he reached out the other day when he
Yeah, he
found
was
out
the
you
1-2 on the team. He was the radio operator, and he was the guy I was talking to.
that's what he said. He said the only thing that he was freaking out the entire time, but the only reason he halfway didn't lose it, he said, was knowing that you and Karate were up there at least watching out and doing what y'all could.
Well, trying to do something to help out.
How did he I mean, I know you could hear the panic in his voice, but how did he handle it considering Ed had his hands full with John?
Well, he handled it fine. I was able to communicate with him. I do remember but then I heard his voice was a little higher anyway. But his voice, and hey, I'd have probably been screaming too, you know.
Okay, I was just wanting to know. He's known for keeping it cool. He was in some very hairy stuff even later
Oh
on,
yeah,
and
I've just never had the pleasure of meeting him. I wish I could, but it just
well,
hasn't worked out.
we can. Well, I'm hoping we can set that up if you'd be open to it, because he actually asked if you'd be open to having both of y'all on to where y'all could reconnect,
Oh
and
sure,
even
sure.
possibly Ed.
That's not a problem.
Yeah, I would absolutely love to get y'all hooked up, especially with what y'all experienced together. It's
Yeah,
absolutely amazing.
it was a sporty night.
That was, and you've got another one, but we've got a few good questions that some folks are wanting to ask you. Jamie's wanting to know, this may seem odd. No, believe me, I've asked all kind of crazy bathroom questions from recon men as well, and pilots. This may seem odd, but what did y'all do to use the restroom when y'all had an especially long sortie
Well, I
or
never
day?
had any reason to use the restroom while I was flying. It was only a 4 hour, and I didn't go get on board when I thought I might have to go. I did all that stuff beforehand. I
Oh yeah.
carried water with me as a survival source. I never drank anything while I was flying. When you got back, you drank a lot because you were dehydrated. I
Wow.
probably should have taken a sip now and then. Maybe I did, but
Yeah.
I don't remember that because I went along because I knew there was a good chance of if you survived,
You need.
you needed to uh, have water, uh, water purification tablets, a little bit of food, ammunition. I carried 3 radios and extra batteries. Uh, I planned on surviving.
And while we're in that, before I'm sure it'll come up before these other questions, but I'll go ahead and ask it. What was your standard for mission loadout? What would you you mentioned you carry your car 15. What would you carry out for the day
Well,
for a
I
flight?
carried 38. Uh, my usual stuff, what I carried when I was in SOG, and I did not have it when I was going after with John and Ed because I was so freaking tired starting out the mission from the previous day. Matter of fact, I knew it was all top secret, and I kept very cryptic, short notes. And I always felt guilty about that. And at the bottom of what I described for John and Ed's mission, at the bottom, I wrote, ugh, this was almost as bad as yesterday. And I didn't write anything about yesterday. I remember
Wow.
the mission, but I didn't write anything. It's kind of,
Um,
my wife still laughs about the, ugh, it's almost as bad as yesterday. But I carried one of the greatest things that I think people should carry, even if they're hiking, is one of those bright orange panels.
mm,
Because I've rescued people that got separated from their team, and they had no radio, but they had an orange panel. And when you're wearing camis and you're in the jungle, you can't be seen. You're not seen. I mean, unless you're down at the treetop and smiling, and we can see your smile, but you can see that orange panel. And whether you're, I don't care if you're in the desert in the woods, if you get your clear spot, somebody's flying over and you're opening and closing that orange panel will that and a small survival mirror. Put that on a lanyard and hang it around your neck, and it has the hole in the middle, and you can direct your sunlight. But you don't have sunlight. That orange panel, you can see that a long ways off. And I would recommend carrying those.
Did you ever come across any strobes or IRs that you could carry that maybe would have helped you out?
Well, we had that, and we also had pin gun flares, but I never had to use it. I was never in the survival mode.
Thank goodness. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, I don't drink, but I'll drink to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If I ever start.
This is an interesting one. Daniel, did you have any duress codes with the SOG men to be used in the event of enemy?
Well, yeah, we all had a number that they'd give you an authorization. So, like I used the number 3030 because I had a 3030 rifle. But if I was captured and they wanted me to do it, I'd give some other number, like 30-06 or something like that. They had other words too that you could use. I don't remember what I used at the time, but you were briefed on all of that ahead of time. You don't want, they're probably going to kill you anyway or put you in a POW camp. So you don't want anybody else coming in and getting shot down and killed.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You have enough things in life to live with. You don't want to sacrifice your friends because somebody's threatening you.
Absolutely. That, I mean, back
you're
to your
already
point,
in deep doo-doo. No use making it worse.
Yeah. It's like some of the recon men later on, besides carrying the signal panels, they also started getting their boonies, the inside of their boonies getting completely sewn in red panels inside, so they could wear the boonie inside out and see nothing but orange on their head. So, and I've heard numerous times that came into play and helped out a lot. This one, I'm not sure y'all worked with Anglico. I know Force Recon did, but did you ever work with any Anglico trained Marines?
No.
That's what
never
I was
had
thinking.
anything to do with the Marines in my FAC mission.
Yeah.
Great guys, but they weren't out there in Laos.
There's another or we just interviewed Ray Carlisle, and he was a 220th cat killer that worked with the Marines, and he was flying DMZ and North Vietnam missions, and he was working with Anglico guys. So
I never even heard the call sign. Doesn't mean it wasn't there.
Yeah. Jake, I'll get you some Anglico stuff that you'll find interesting. We've got a question lull for just a minute. Would you first off, before we get into the story, did you mentioned you really didn't get to know any of the guys all that often. You heard voices, call signs, and anything like that. Did you ever, by chance, before your incident with Mr. Ralph Rod in RT Arkansas, did you ever meet Ralph or know of Ralph at all?
Not ahead of time. It was only 6 or 7 years ago that I met Ralph. It was 2000 when I found out his name, and that was from John Plaster. I never knew the name of any of the people on that team. Matter of fact, I had forgotten that there was a captain on that team, a guy named Richard Moss, who lives in Gainesville, Florida. He came through the hurricane okay. I checked with him, and but that was an interesting mission. Lieutenant Colonel Apt, asked or directed Richard to go out with Ralph Rod, one of his most experienced team leaders, to give him a flavor of what goes on these teams. They usually didn't have officers go, and they encountered or North Vietnamese regulars. That's usually what they had on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. The Viet Cong were pretty much just in Vietnam. And they ended up being in a firefight, and I forget whether all or most of them were wounded. But they did break contact, but the monsoon started, and they laid up in the jungle for 4 days in torrential rain, unable to build a fire. You didn't want to give away your position. If any of the enemy was looking for you in those torrential rains, how the heck you wouldn't see anybody till you stumbled on them. And after the 4th day, I went out and looked for them, and it wasn't raining, but there were 2 cloud decks, a low and a higher one. And using navigational stuff, I knew about where they were, and so their valley, which was a long valley, was covered with clouds. And to my east, there were mountains poking up through the ridge line, poking up through the clouds. And on the other side of the ridge, I could see a hole in the clouds. I had no idea what was below them, below that hole. And I saw that there was a river that ran from that valley into the other valley. So I went over into the other valley, down through the hole, hoping that I wasn't going into the lion's den. Got down on the river, should have had skis, and got through the ridge line and into this long valley, found the team. The A1s were above. They had come to where I had been, and they were between the clouds. And I told them that I was going to take up a heading the length that corresponded to the length of this valley. And I gave them the bottom of the clouds, which I remember was about 1,100 feet above the ground. And the clouds are 800 feet thick. And I told them, when they see me, I'm going to roll it over and go on a reciprocal heading back down through the clouds, and I would be on the left, and they could follow me down. And they did. I showed them where the team was. I had to go back out through that ridge line. The helicopters happened to be in the wrong valley, lead them into the right valley. And they picked up the team and took them back. And I think all or most of them were medevaced out. And I never got to see them or know who it was. And that's the way it stood until 2000, when I joined the SOA and was interviewed by John Plaster, along with meeting Ed and John St. Martin. I hadn't seen them since 1969, and that was a great meeting. And it's been a wonderful time. Anytime we were all together, or one or the other with me, down at the Special Ops reunion, that's always an interesting occasion. And like I say, it's an eclectic group of folks. And over the years, these different guys find out that I was a Covey FAC. That's enough to get a hug. And if they find, some of them just remember your number, which is amazing that they remember something that long. And like I say, having Rambo hug you is an emotional experience. At least it is for me. These are some really special people, and I'm honored to have worked with them.
I mean, it's a testament to you, because I mean, and as well, you should be humbled. But the SOG men showing their respect, coming up to you and thanking you, because I mean, again, if you'd like to learn a lot more about Mr. Don and the men he was supporting and helping, and you'll get the full rundown. This is John Plaster's Secret Commandos Behind Enemy Lines with Elite Warriors of SOG. And he speaks about, you know, he's fed up, they're reined in, and he knows, he's quoted, he says he knows they're not going to get out if they don't get out. And he basically says, screw it, I'm going out, I'm getting them, I'm going to find them, and they're going to get out. And sure enough, they did. And
one of the things I might add to that mission, it took place their code name was Moonstone.
Mm.
And that was the 20th of July of 69, the day that Armstrong walked on the moon. So every time that comes up, I know what I was doing.
Wow. That's another interesting part of not only remembering if when y'all were over there, if y'all were there when the moon incident, and I remember Recon Man telling me about they were on a mission and got word that they were on the moon, and the yards looking at them and saying, "You can't go to the moon. You can't take rocket to the moon. It's not possible." It's pretty funny hearing those stories, but
Yeah.
they're I think a really interesting story beside that'll tie in with the B-52s and all that, but also that you had your own, if we can say it, private hunting ground. Could you kind of go into a little bit about your private hunting ground that you'd like to
Well, we were
use?
the northern Cambodia, where it joins in the tri-border area with Laos and Vietnam, kind of it's almost like a horn. It pulls up to the right, to the northeast, and we refer to it as the pepper basket. I don't know if that's a good. Anyway, uh, and so to make sure that the radar didn't see a peacock, which was at Pleiku, and if I had rockets left and I was by myself, I didn't want to endanger anybody else. But I hated to bring rockets back because you had to, your butt was already tired and sore. The cushion that you had, if you could call it a cushion, was only about an inch thick, and that was on a steel plate. And so if you had a rocket left, you had to taxi over to the de-arming area, wait for somebody to come out and pin it, and then taxi back in. And you could almost, your butt could be black and blue from being so sore. Anyway. Um, So I would try to find targets for my remaining rockets. And I used to cut across northern Cambodia to Vietnam, and there was a hill between me and Pleiku. So I could stay down below that hill, and they couldn't see me on the radar that I was violating this area. And the North Vietnamese had a sanctuary area. So I would cut across there, and the sunlight shone on some guys that were pushing loaded down bicycles. They didn't ride the bicycles, but you could get on a pretty skinny trail and carry a lot of weight. But the low cloud deck and the afternoon sun, a sunbeam lit up this place where these guys were walking underneath these trees. And so I rolled in on them and released the rockets. And I don't know if I hit anybody else, but one guy flipped in the air and was laying on the ground smoldering. So I figured he was dead. You have just a tiny bit of white phosphorus on you, you're going to be one of the best break dancers around trying to get that off. But I couldn't see anybody else with the cargo spilled here and there, and the underbrush. You don't know if anybody's laying there. I don't know, but got that. And then another time, I was always looking for targets of opportunity. One time, this looked like a big tree coming around the corner of this hill on the road, and unless it had really long roots, I figured it might be a camouflage truck, and it was. And I rolled in on that and put a rocket just below the windshield, blew away the camouflage. And I was coming around to hit it again, and it was obviously an ammo truck because it had one hell of an explosion, secondary. And glad I didn't get too close to it. And so, but that was my private hunting ground. And in Vietnam, if they were having an arc light or B-52 raid, which was usually 3 B-52s in echelon, each with about 108 bombs apiece, they would give a warning on guard channel. Everybody monitored guard channel, and they would say heavy artillery on this radial from such and such station between, they called it DME, which is distance measuring equipment that you have on the airplane, tell you how far you are from the station, between the 20 and 30 DME or the 35 and the 30 and 40, whatever it was. But they just started bombing Cambodia, and they didn't want to announce to the world that they were bombing a neutral country. And of course, that was a restricted flying area, and there were no Americans down, no smart ones down there. And except for moi, I was down there hunting. And I caught movement off to my left, and I looked, and here comes about 400 miles an hour, all these explosions, and you didn't have time to hiccup. It just went right across the top of you, and out the end, the stuff was boiling up around you, and you come out the other side not knowing if you were alive or not. And you realize that, you lived through something that you probably shouldn't have lived through, and had they hit you, nobody would have ever found the parts. And even if it didn't blow up, if one of those 500-pound bombs hit your wing is going to definitely be unflyable. And a few days later, I was telling a friend at Pleiku, one of my fellow FACs, about the B-52 raid that I flew through. And his comment was, "I bet you dirtied your shorts." And I said, "Contraire, old friend. I was puckered so tight I couldn't go for 3 days." So that took care of the dirty shorts part of it. And I just feel fortunate that I'm still here.
Yeah, not many men can say they've lived on the exploding end of a arc light. I mean
Yeah.
that was one of the crazier
Yeah.
ones in the book, and I
Well, it's
every time I
324 bombs, and they miss. I have a dear friend. He lives in Omaha, who was a 200 series FAC, Russ Howard, and he had the same experience. And I'm thankful he survived, and thankful I did also.
man, oh man, I bet you were very careful on your future hunts after that.
Well,
That's a
well, after that they started announcing, but at first they didn't.
ah okay
And
okay.
John says I was just taking the shortcut, but in actuality, it was my private hunting ground.
I like that private hunting ground, getting them when you can.
Well, I
There
believed in getting like if somebody told me I was on another mission, which was, I wasn't even in SOG then, but I ended up uh, putting an airstrike in on two airstrikes in a whole lot of people, well
was
off
that
the Ho Chi Minh
was
Trail.
that the one where you came across about 100, 150 in the wide out in the open that you just
No, no,
utterly
no, no.
oh
This was at a cabbage patch that looked innocent, but the team that was on the ground, and I don't even know if it was SOG. Somebody was on the ground, and I was directed to contact them, and they were like 2 valleys over from the Ho Chi Minh Trail,
oh
and it just looked like a big cabbage patch with one hooch. But they said there was big buildings underneath the trees and lots of people. But anyway, we hit that once, and then came back a little later when they were helping take care of the wounded and the dead, and hit them again. And the team estimated that there were about 200 killed or wounded. But
oh
and I felt bad about killing people that were helping people. But as one of the senior officers said to me, it's better to kill them there than let them kill Americans in South Vietnam. So uh, after that, it didn't bother me.
it was that that may have been the one was that the team in Cambodia that found themselves in the truck park?
Oh no, no, this was in
Oh,
Vietnam.
another one.
The
Okay.
truck park was a whole different story. I
Wow.
got called
See, I
out.
mean, you've
I
got
got called out in the wee hours of the morning and contacted. They already had a C-123 dropping flares,
mhm,
and this team. When I contacted them, they said they were in a truck park. I said, "Well, how close to the truck park are you?" They
right.
said, "No, we're in a truck park." So, and the enemy had them surrounded, and they said it sounded like they were beating on garbage can covers. And it's only an 8-man team, but I've never forgotten the two guys, uh, Joker and Wildcat. I wish I could meet them. I heard that those guys got wounded later, so I have no idea if they're still alive or what. God, I hope they are. But the 123, I think their name was Blind Bat, and was replaced by AC 130. but I couldn't put them in on the target because it was not a well-defined target. It was very hard to keep track of the team because there was low fog in every depression, but it was moving. And these characters, and of course, they talk in a whisper. They even yell in a whisper. Try doing that. But anyway, I got an itch. Anyway, as I observed them, and 3 mortars went off, and Joker couldn't get hold of Wildcat. No, Wildcat couldn't get hold of Joker. So he was calling him, and this is on FM radio, Fox Mike, and Joker, this is Wildcat, and the guy's not answering. And I'm thinking their perimeter has been breached, and I'm wondering what kind of a John Wayne maneuver am I going to do and get my butt killed getting these guys out. And I tried calling him. The AC 130 tried calling him, and no answer. And finally, Wildcat, or Joker, this is Wildcat. He said, I've been trying to get hold of you. Saw those mortars go off. I thought maybe they got you. And this guy is calm as if he's using your restroom down the hall. Nah, I was taking a shit. And those mortars knocked me over. I got that crap all over my leg, and that stuff stinks. If I ever needed an autopilot, I could have used the one that night because I about fell out of the sky laughing. It was still serious, and then daylight came, and the A1 showed up. We kicked ass, took names, and the funny thing, they laid in some napalm, and I said, how's that? He said, oh, Covey, that was fantastic. I can smell them burning. I said, good grief. Got them all out safely, and they went back to a nice steak and eggs dinner for breakfast, and I'm thinking, I wonder if they still had that smell in their nostrils. But,
I remember that.
It was serious, but it was funny.
Yeah, I mean, I the napalm, and then y'all had gotten, gosh, trees. I specifically remember tree limbs hitting them and cutting their arms and legs where bombs were exploding and hitting.
That was an entirely different mission. We were on our way to insert a team. And this team. And we were just about to cross over this other team. And they peeked around a karst there, which is kind of a shaly rock that pokes up. And there were about 125 North Vietnamese sitting down to lunch, eating their rice ball or whatever the heck they eat. And so the guy was spotted. So, a little automatic weapons fire, and the team ran around and got behind rocks and trees and stuff. And so here's all these guys going, and they couldn't have ordered TAC air and got it any sooner. We were just about to run over when they call a prairie fire emergency because they could probably hear us coming. So the helicopters went on. I had the A1s come in. The first ones laid down napalm on these guys. Now they were part of that group were stuck between the napalm and the team hiding behind the rocks and the trees. So I had the second guy drop daisy cutters. That's bombs with an extended fuse. So the blast goes sideways, hence the daisy cutters. It trims the bushes, the grass, the flowers, whatever's there. And I asked the guy, the team member, I said, how was that? He said, oh, that was great, Covey. Can you get a little bit closer? Oh, he said, that was great, Covey. It's tearing the limbs off the tree I'm hiding behind, and he wanted the ordnance closer. I said, well, I'm not putting it any closer. There's nobody standing out there if it took the limbs off the tree you're hiding behind. These are dumb bombs. They were not smart bombs. But they were able to break away and get away, and then we finished up inserting the other team, and all was well. But I just always laughed at, can you get a little bit closer? It's tearing the limbs off the tree.
some of their comebacks about saying it's the trees are coming off. I put it in my hip pocket, or we're getting hit with stuff.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Not
It
only
amazed me how calm these guys were when, as the saying goes, "fit hit the shan," you know?
oh yeah, when the doo doo has hit the fan, it's amazing how calm they stay. I
Yeah.
mean, some had to learn. I've heard some funny stories of some of the better recon men on their first couple were, like you said, screaming, and the covey rider with y'all had to quickly calm them down, and after that they were just like having ice in their veins.
It was a very interesting mission. I was honored to fly it, even though I tried hard not to have anything to do with it. But you can't beat years later somebody thanking you for helping them.
Oh, again, I can't imagine. I mean, I get goosebumps hearing about you getting thanked, hugged, and even your actual
Yeah.
people
It,
remembering your or your
it
covey.
still chokes me up when it happens, even if it's just over the phone. And I've had a
It
few of those.
That's a testament. I mean, you've literally saved hundreds of lives. I mean, that's
Well,
not
I
an
don't know about
overstatement.
hundreds,
No, no,
but a
that
bunch.
you have from the recon men and other operations getting in there and disrupting stuff. Yeah, I would feel easily to say that it could,
Yeah.
because you got to remember, you putting in airstrikes, getting a team out easily. They could have needed to declare a more of a prairie fire emergency and bring teams helo assets and other team members in. They could have gotten aircraft down, teams killed. So I absolutely believe that wholeheartedly.
Well, I had the
You're
good fortune to fly with some tremendous people. The thing I never understood, the heavier the fighting, the more the FACs wanted to be part of it, and you almost had to beat them back with a stick. Uh, they'd climb all over each other, elbow each other out of the way to take the mission. You could go out there and get killed, but these guys wanted to be part of the action. And I always figured, well, I'm probably crazy, but I don't know about these other guys.
I mean, when I finally started getting to speak to some of the 1-0s and the that went over to the Covey side, I don't know if you ever got to fly any of these gentlemen. That's that's Shoebox Carpenter, if I'm not mistaken.
Never met
The
him.
the world famous Larry White, recon
No.
man and Covey rider. That's Emmett Dover. I don't know if he was riding or
Well,
just
a
visiting.
lot of these guys, we only knew them by their code name.
Yes,
I mean,
sir.
I didn't know who Howard Davis. I didn't know his name for years.
And and it's amazing also to the fact that some of these guys have so many photos out there. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find some more SOG photos of some guys that Mr. Don may know. You've got your Joe Walkers, your William Lewises. Some of those men were around when you were around, but
Yeah, but
it's
that
just a
does,
testament.
it doesn't
It's
mean anything because
Yeah, you don't know. Like you
just
said,
just a handful of different guys that I flew with,
absolutely.
and I've forgotten most of their names, even their call signs.
It's
Uh,
amazing. And what I'll be we're coming up, we've got another really good story, and we'll get to the last bit of questions, but I'll be anxious to hopefully be able to reunite you, Ed, and Mr. John Blah in the coming week or month. I think that would be wonderful to have
well,
all
whatever.
you
I'll
three
try
together.
try to make myself available. I enjoyed your
Yeah.
interview.
Um, we've got one question right now, and then I was hoping we could close on that amazing lake story that is so good. Jake B would like to know: does he by chance know or remember a Stephen L. Bennett? He was with the CIA working with Project 404. I
I'm not
said
familiar
you,
with 404, and the
yeah.
name does not ring a bell.
Okay, he did work with the 20th, but I think he was a little bit later than you. I think he might have been in the 70s, or if I'm not mistaken. So,
Yeah, I
uh,
didn't know a lot of people at the name. I knew a few.
mhm.
One guy I haven't seen since I think his name was Oh, same as one of the astronauts. I think it was Shepard.
There
But
is a shepherd. I've
there,
got a photo of a shepherd, and I need to try and find it.
but
I'll send it.
anyway, he's the one that I got my M79 grenade launcher and all the ammunition that I used to carry with me and occasionally fire. Never made a lot of money with it, but I left it. I left it in the locker on John and Ed's mission because I was too damn tired to carry all that crap
Oh,
out there. We
wow,
might have been a little
man.
more effective if we had that.
Yeah, yeah, but it
Probably got
happens.
ourselves, probably got our asses killed too.
Yeah, I was about to say it worked out how it needed to work out.
Yeah.
Did did was that a regular thing? I mean, I know you carried 20 to 35 or maybe 40 for the car 15, but other than that one, did you carry both for you and
Well, I carried all the ammunition for the car, and carried the M79.
did
But
you get the did you get the guys to give you a little bit of a mix to where you might could get some HE or some more
I just
effective?
had HE, and the stuff I kept in my room was the buckshot. I
Oh,
figured if we
okay.
had anybody coming over, that
That's the
fire a lot
best.
of crap down range.
Oh yeah.
But
Oh yeah.
I don't know.
That's a perfect one. We got two questions, and then that lake store will be a great one. What was Don's code name?
Well, I didn't have Steve Yates. Hey, Steve, how you doing there, partner? A great guy. Uh, I didn't have Covey 538. That and my name together back then was classified, but I just went by Covey 538
Wow,
just to call it.
classified already. Wow,
Yeah.
man, that's very interesting. Um, well, he was wanting to thank you for answering and sharing for the first time. Um, I think to show a lighter side, since we've covered some really gung ho stuff today, I think to close it out, if you wouldn't mind showing a lighter, funnier side, would you mind speaking about the lake? And Steve said, "Doing great, Don. Thank you for your service, my friend."
Thank you. Well, several years ago at the Special Ops reunion, they had this couple. They were from Britain, and they went down the Ho Chi Minh Trail after the war. And the second time they went down, they were actually the last ones to interview General Giap, who was in charge of everything. And about, I don't know if it was halfway, but a long way down, they had some village chief take them up to what they was referred to as Spirit Lake. We always referred to it as Dollar Lake. It was a nice round lake, and just south of it were two long areas of elephant grass, but from the air, it looked like a fairway. But of course, elephant grass is about 12 feet tall, so you probably couldn't drive a golf ball down through there. And they went up to this lake, and they had the village chief marry them. They were standing ankle deep in the water. So after Virginia, and I don't know if his name was Clyde or something along that line, briefed and they showed these pictures. They briefed, or they interviewed Ed and I for some military documentary that was shown in Britain, and I've never seen it. But I asked her about Spirit Lake. I said, she had asked the people, why do they call it Spirit Lake? And they talked about many years before, the spirit came out of the lake in the form of white smoke. Well, on this mission, I had been up north of that, and we damn near got shot down. It was very, very heavy flak. It was in front of the airplane. It was above the airplane. It was off to the side. And the fighters were yelling at us to get out of there. And I did a split S, which is rolling the airplane over and doing a half a loop, but downward. And when I looked through we had a window in the top of the fuselage. When I rolled it over, there was flak down there too. So, but we went down, and we had 37 millimeter blow up and put holes in the back of the airplane. Didn't do any serious damage, just a little sheet metal. And my the guy that I had with me was a Lieutenant Rick Felker. He lives in Tucson. And so we're flying back and we're well off the trail and climbed up to 10,000 feet and the airplane was running fine. And I had one rocket left, and off to the east was Dollar Lake. And like I said, we didn't like to take rockets home. So, and this is one of the dumbest things I've ever done. I told Rick, I said, "You want to see me put that rocket in the middle of that lake?" He said, "That's too far away." I said, "Don't worry about it. I do it all the time." And so I didn't. But so I pulled the power off, pulled the nose up, rolled it down so the nose dropped down and pulled it up, lining up with the lake. And then I pulled the nose up and fired it so it would arc over toward the lake. I thought if I hit the lake, it would be pure luck. And we rolled back on course and kept looking and looking. And it was a dumb move because it could have been a fast mover coming through, and I could have shot down an airplane. And that certainly would have given me a room at the Leavenworth Hotel. Anyway, we kept looking and looking, and we knew the rocket didn't get stuck in a cloud. And by God, out of the middle of the lake comes the Spirit, the white phosphorus rocket. Probably wouldn't have been noticed by anybody. It's coming down at about 120 miles an hour. It's a 2.75-inch rocket. It would have just made a little splash and hit the bottom of the lake and exploded and burned, and the smoke would exit the lake eventually. And it did, in the form of a white phosphorus cloud. And whoever observed it observed the Spirit leaving Spirit Lake. And that's how it got its name. And they were happy to know that, how the Spirit got in Spirit Lake. So that was the fun story. And we landed uneventful and didn't have to go to the de-arming area because we no longer had that rocket with us. One of my dumbest things I've done in Southeast Asia, but it turned out all right.
It did because I mean that's a very very interesting and funny story, and you know I was speaking to the man I mentioned earlier that worked with the Anglico guys. He made the mistake of coming in with a God, my eyelid is twitching. He made the mistake of coming in with a rocket. Evidently had electrical issues that didn't fire, and but what he didn't understand was till later that it was primed and ready. It just didn't get the bump that it needed. So he's coming in. He thinks he's hit it on safety, hits the landing. They land, and about the time he gets going and turning, it fires off a Willie Peter and goes right under the control tower and almost goes into the CCN SOG compound. And he almost thought he was going to have to park the plane, run, and go hide inside the city because the SOG men were going to come after him.
That would clear up your constipation.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He never made that mistake again. Any way he could get it off the aircraft, he never came home again with a rocket in the tube.
Well, I didn't want that kind of incident either, and it was better to shoot at something or someone out there. That's why I had my own private hunting ground.
Absolutely, and I'll that's still my favorite. I love that the private hunting ground. We've kind of got some viewers coming in and out. I'll guys questions if y'all end up watching later. I know you've got work today. I will get them to Don so he can answer if you didn't get any in. But Don, we're coming up on an hour and 40 minutes or so. Did you have anything else you'd like to share with us today before we
it's
close
been a
out?
pleasure, and I hope the folks enjoyed it.
Oh, absolutely. We've almost got a record number in here right now watching with us, about 35 or so. So we've got a great viewing, and folks have heard your name a lot from Ed, John, and a few others. And I'm hoping here in the next few weeks we might can get a reunion together, all three of y'all on here.
Well, that'd be nice. I hope you could put this on some kind of an email and reduce it in size so I can send it out to some friends and relatives.
what I can do is I'll chop up some little portions of it for you, and I'll send it to you. And I can also I've got one of the viewers has sent me a external hard drive, and I can download it completely and send it to you as your
Well,
own
that
video.
would be wonderful. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'm going to
Anytime,
start
bud.
doing that. Yep, I will be in touch with you, and
Probably
hopefully
time to
we
take
can.
the dogs out for a walk, isn't it?
It is. We've hit, you know the schedule as well as anyone too. We'll start trying to work on Ed and John to see about getting y'all hooked up.
Well, those are great people. I
Yes,
treasure their
sir.
friendship.
Everyone is saying thank you, and they're looking forward to if we can get y'all three together. It'll be a great show. So
Well, thanks
we'll,
for the opportunity, and I appreciate all the work you went through.
yes, sir. Thank you for taking time with us today and all you do to share and educate me and the group. Steve Yates wanted to thank you. You look great. Thank you, sir, for thanking me. It's all Mr. John here. I mean Mr. John, Mr. Don sharing and trusting me to give him a platform. So without Don and the other guys, nothing would be going on. So again, thank you for spending the day with us.
Hey, take care, partner. See
Yes,
you the
sir.
next time.
I'll be in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See you.